ہمارا آزاد کشمیر، آزاد کشمیر، وطن ہمارا آزاد کشمیر، آزاد کشمیر، باغوں اور پہاڑوں والا، دریاؤں کو ساروں والا، آسمان ہے جس کا پرچم، پرچم چاند ستاروں والا، جنت کے نظاروں والا، جموں اور کشمیر ہمارا وطن ہمارا آزاد کشمیر، آزاد کشمیر، وطن ہمارا آزاد کشمیر، آزاد کشمیر.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. I welcome you all. My name is Faika Ibrahim and I am very humbled to be given an opportunity to conduct this webinar on this esteemed forum of WIL, which is Women Institute of Learning and Leadership. Our today's topic is very close to our heart, and though it is a very painful, the reality that we are facing, but we are all struggling all over the world to strive and to work for a meaningful resolution of this dispute about Kashmir. And today's topic is Kashmir under perpetual lockdown, a trajectory of oppression, suppression, and obliteration. I will start today's discussion and webinar with the introduction of the WIL Forum, which is Women Institute of Learning and Leadership. یہ ایک ناٹ فار پروفٹ اینٹی ہے اور غیر سیاسی تنظیم ہے جس کا مقصد خواتین کو باہمی تعاون اور مشاورتی تربیتی فورم فراہم کرنا ہے جو خواتین کو نہ صرف مختلف منفرد چیلنجز سے نبرد آزما ہونا سکھاتا ہے بلکہ ایسے مواقع بھی میسر کرتا ہے جن کا سامنا قومی اور بین الاقوامی تنظیموں میں قائدانہ عہدوں پر فائز خواتین کو اکثر کرنے پڑتے ہیں. خواتین کو معاشی اور ثقافتی طور پر فروغ پذیر ہونے کے لیے WIL مختلف موضوعات پر رہنمائی اور تعلیمی پروگرام ترتیب کر دیتا ہے تاکہ خواتین زندگی کے ساتھ ساتھ ہر شعبے میں وابستہ افراد اور کی ترقی کے سفر کو جاری رکھ سکیں. WIL کا بنیادی کام افراد کی آبیاری کرنا اور مختلف آگاہی کے پروگرام کو بھی تشکیل دینا ہے جو کہ حقیقی عالمی مسائل سے نمٹنے کے لیے مؤثر واقع فراہم کرے. میں اپرچونٹی لینا چاہوں گی آپ سب سے ٹو انٹروڈیوس آر اسٹیم چیئر پرسن آف WIL, ڈاکٹر نوشابہ حسن مراد, جو کہ WIL کی بانی چیئر پرسن ہیں. آپ نے 1988 میں ڈاؤ انٹرنیشنل میڈیکل یونیورسٹی کراچی سے MBBS کی سند حاصل کی. آپ نے میڈیکل اور کلر ڈاپلر الٹراساؤنڈ میں اسپیشلائزیشن کی ڈگری حاصل کی. اس کے علاوہ آپ نے تھامس جیفرسن یونیورسٹی فیلاڈیلفیا پینسلوینیا یونائٹڈ اسٹیٹس آف امریکہ کے معروف طبی ادارے سے بھی فارغ التحصیل ہیں اور آپ نے اپنے بیچ میں اعلیٰ اہلیت کے ساتھ ڈپلومہ حاصل کیا ہے. عمدہ تعلیمی قابلیت حاصل کرنے کے بعد 1996 سے سرکاری اور ریڈیولوجی کے شعبہ جات میں شاندار خدمات کا انجام دیتی رہی ہیں. آپ یونیورسٹی آف مینجمنٹ اینڈ ٹیکنالوجی لاہور اور ILM ٹرسٹ کے بورڈ آف ٹرسٹیز کے قابل احترام رکن بھی ہیں. Now I would like to introduce our esteemed guest speakers for this forum. First, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Dr. Ijaz Ikram. Though he doesn't really need an introduction, he is a very well-renowned scholar, but still I would like to take a few words, a few minutes to introduce him for our listeners. Dr. Ijaz Ikram is a Pakistani American and very well-renowned scholar specializing in interface between religion and transnational politics of the Muslim world. He has his MA in Comparative and Religion Studies from the School of International Services at American University, as well as an MA in World Politics and a PhD in International Relations from the Catholic University of America. Currently, he is a professor of religion and world politics at Southwestern University of Political Science and Law, Chongqing, China. I welcome you, Dr. Saab. Thank you very much for joining us today. And I would like to introduce our young fellow, Dr. Sania Munir. Dr. Sania Munir holds a PhD in Pakistan Studies from University of Punjab, split degree from Royal Holloway University of London, United Kingdom. Her research is focused on government, politics, conflict studies, and gender-based violence. Currently, she is a research fellow at Center for Security Strategy and Policy Research. I welcome you, my esteemed guest and panelists, and Dr. Noshaba, and all the listeners who are joining this forum. Now, to introduce our today's webinar, I would like to say a few things before we start on with our discussion. And the pattern of the webinar is that first, of course, I'm going to open the floor for our discussants. And then we have a lot of questions which our discussants, panelists can address to it briefly so we can learn a lot out of this small time period that we have arranged for ourselves, and you have taken out time from your work as well. Thank you very much. And now for Kashmir, as we all know, that it has been more than 7 decades that they are suffering many brutalities. And it is with every passing day brings a new kind of turmoil in Indian occupied Kashmir. Years to strive left, Years of strife left a generation traumatized. India's clampdown disrupted daily life and made it a living hell for them. The vicious circle of oppression, suppression, and obliteration in Jammu and Kashmir has egregiously affected daily lives of people. The COVID-19 has wreaked havoc with the marginalized community of Kashmir. The lockdown and restrictions on communication have caused immense hardship for the region's people. India is an apartheid state, committing atrocities on innocent Kashmiri and minorities, but unfortunately, the world has kept a mum on the issue and allowing Indian brutalities to commit this genocide. The silence is the loudest noise and loudest sound. Let's listen to the voices of Kashmiris and make them realize that they are not alone. Day of Freedom is not far away. Women Institute of Learning and Leadership, in collaboration with University of Management and Technology, brings you an excellent learning opportunity and hence this webinar. So I open the floor and I would like to start historical perspective, and I will request any of my speakers that who would like to begin this discussion with a brief overview of historical perspective, and we can then from there on lead on to our further questions which are asked by the persons who have joined the forum. Thank you very much. Dr. Saab, Dr. Sanya, Dr. Ijaz, if any of you would like to say a few things about the historical perspective and in historical context, the dispute of Kashmir, kindly.
In just 1 minute, I can get the attention of the audience towards 3 dimensions of this issue. There is an international dimension. In this dimension, Pakistan, China, India, Afghanistan, Russia, USA, and Israel, and increasingly Turkey, is interested in solving this issue because it's going to affect us all. In the regional dimension, it is the stakeholders, which is China, India, and Pakistan. And in the domestic dimension, it is Pakistani side of Kashmir, Indian occupied Kashmir, and the people of Kashmir who want to be with Pakistan. Now, within these 3 dimensions, we have to see that which dimension is most immediate for Kashmiri people and why. And that is the domestic dimension, in which an overwhelming majority of the Kashmiri people want to be with Pakistan. And I think that the question is not whether Kashmir should be free, independent with India, with Pakistan, or under some kind of UN mandate. The question is who has the power to grab it? And I think that I will keep a lot of my commentary focused on that. And so, thank you.
Dr. Jaz, I would like to take on further as you have opened the floor with the discussion. That do you think that is there any conflict management options available with the current situation that we have right now under the dispute that we are facing? With the background that India has revoked Article 340, and within the current situation, do you think that this conflict could be managed in an appropriate way, and what options could be available under the given circumstances if?
Yeah, very good question. And I think that unfortunately, if we look at over the last 70 years, if there had been any possibility of conflict management, we would have already exhausted it. We would already gone that route. But the fact is that India and Pakistan fought 3 wars, and it was eyewash, it was hoodwink, it was the United Nations fraud, it was big power politics. And so, which is why a civilized conflict management solution in which we sit down on the table and talk logic, it does not exist in the case of Kashmir. And what has happened since the last August 5th, 2019, almost a year and a half, it there is so much evidence. It's as glaringly obvious as daylight that no solution exists for this, because the Indian fascist Modi government is ready to go even beyond the current level of oppression in Kashmir if the need be. And who are the people who are their advisors? It's the United States of America, it's the CIA, it's the Israelis, because they want to subvert the rise of China. And for that, it is very important for them to stop the BRI process and the CPEC. And hence, India has to be empowered no matter what to do America's dirty job in this region. And so if the Pakistanis keep on thinking that there is going to be ever a peaceful, civilized, sitting on the table, having a cup of tea with each other, that type of solution, I think we will be fooling ourselves completely. I think that now the issue has moved to straight power concepts, and it has moved completely inside the kinetic domain, where the non-kinetic means have been exhausted already.
I completely agree with you, Dr. Sabir, that it's true that the ground realities are different than what we see in the international media. And of course, we do see it, but nothing has been done by the international forums that we look upon to for any kind of mediation or any kind of help. आपने जो एक बात कही, that was very interesting for me, and I have read about it otherwise as well, that CPEC plays a very important role between our relationship with China. And there is a theory that if you have stronger people and you have alliance with stronger power, then you have a better standing for mediation or to be a position in some kind of negotiations at some international forum. Since CPAC is something that Pakistan holds an edge over it, और इंडिया की भी यही reservations है जिसकी वजह से all this movement, and I can say कि why now that they have revoked Article 340, because this is the time that they wanted to hold that control and power over geographically in that area. How do you think that China is going to play its role or any kind of, because it is going to be beneficial for China as well, if China is going to play any role in this? Would you like to shed some light on that, what is the role of China in this perspective?
Yes, in the regional and the international dimensions, as I mentioned a bit earlier, that it is very important for China to have a westward route for its energy link coming into China and its exports and trade going out of China. The world, the Western powers are still very strong in the Pacific, and they still have the power to stop this, to block the Strait of Malacca, stop the Chinese energy flow, and stop the Chinese trade flow outbound. If that happens, China comes down on their knees. And so the only chance that China has is to have lots of land links, which is to the west of China, most of which goes through the Muslim countries of the Muslim world. And the CPEC, which is the flagship of this project, goes through Pakistan, to Gwadar. If China doesn't do that, China will die. China may not die, but China will become like South Korea and Japan. It will become a subservient power to the West, and the status quo will spring back again, in which the people, the elite of global Zionism, will once again start ruling the world. Right now, they are in danger because there are limits to their power, and that's the golden chance for people of different cultures, humanity in general, is to have a multipolar world order. So they want to have one world government. So if China becomes weak, not only that Pakistan may break, the whole world will be once again subjugated by different types of powers. So the reason Pakistan might break if the CPEC doesn't happen is because if we drag our feet on CPEC and we keep on talking this talk of, oh, we want to balance between the United States and China, oh, China might be another East India company who will come and be just as bad as the Americans or the British. I think that this is liberal propaganda that is aimed at hurting Pakistan's interest, because you are not in a position, Pakistanis are not in a position to make China angry or to drag their feet on CPEC, because all of our defense, most of our defense infrastructure historically has been developed by China, continues to be developed by China, and we rely on most sensitive technologies that you require to fight a war against India, because this war is knocking on your door and they will push it to you at any time right now. They are just waiting to upgrade their technologies. And right now, because Pakistani technology through the Chinese help is a little bit more superior to the Indian one, therefore that's keeping them behind. They're keeping them back. So if the Pakistanis make China angry by dragging their feet on CPEC, what may happen is that China say, all right, so we will go back to being a country like South Korea or Japan. We will live on less. But what about you? Maybe we will make the CPEC route through India. And India at that time might be very happy in isolating Pakistan, snatching our best friend for them and giving them the sea route. So the Pakistanis have to be very, very realistic that Pakistanis and the Chinese are now, they're joined at the hip. There is no way out. A stronger China is good for challenging the status quo power, which have actually held the world hostage for the last 200 years. The rise of China is very important to subvert that very vicious structure of power, which is anti-humanity. And uh, and Pakistan is very important that Pakistan stays alive because Afghanistan is linked with it, and now Khalistan is linked with it. So it's Pakistan is, we have to reconceptualize Pakistan as more than a nation state now. It is going to have to confederate with three big elements in the near future, and that's also not very good for the future of the nation state, alhamdulillah. And that is that the Afghans need a corridor through Pakistan to prosper, to become economically well off, so that terrorism goes away, and so that we don't allow anybody else to use the land of Pakistan to bomb our brothers and sisters in Afghanistan. And so same situation is happening in Khalistan. It's no longer the Kashmir issue now. I call it the Pak cross, P-A-K, imagining the Pak cross. Pak cross is Pakistan, Afghanistan, Khalistan. So you have on one side a large number of Pashtuns at our border who want to trade with China and use our port in Gwadar. On the other hand, you have a large number of our Punjabi brothers, Sikhs, who are going to be landlocked should they get independence, which they will. There is no stopping that now. There may be a lot of destruction, there may be a lot of wars and so forth, but the Sikhs are not going to play with the Modi regime anymore. And I think that they are very well disposed in now having their own nation state. And so the Kashmir independence and the Khalistan independence will happen more or less at the same time. So the Kashmir will also use the Pakistani, will confederate with Pakistan. The Khalistanis will confederate with Pakistan, and the Afghans will have to confederate with Pakistan. And so then that stage, Pakistan and the Chinese are dependent on Pakistan. At that stage, Pakistan actually is going to call the shots. But the agents of the white man and the agents of the status quo power of the Israelis and the Zionists and these liberals and all these bad people who do not have Pakistani people's best interest in their mind, they are the ones who are sitting there. They're dominant in the media, they're dominant in academia, they are controlling the narrative. So if Pakistan has to actually recover this dream that I just presented in front of you very briefly, they have to first throw out the fifth columnist, severely marginalize them, and maybe even incarcerate some of them that are guilty of treason, such as many in the political parties, the people inside your business communities that are causing the meltdown. They become the tools in the hybrid warfare, tools of the empire. And so now my final point is about the Pakistani ruling elite. That the Pakistani ruling elite, it suffers from this malaise of is trying to balance. There's colonized, deeply colonized in the mind. They are in the habitual subservience to the white man, and they have the fear and awe of the white man, and they need to come out of that. I mean, that was 200 years ago. The white man has come and gone, and their society is now imploding. So you need to have confidence in your own beliefs and values, confidence in your own strong points. We have some cards in our hands that we never play. And so, we need to start playing those. But our ruling elite, and here the ruling elite, of course, the civilian is completely corrupt. We have an honest and upright prime minister, alhamdulillah, but he cannot do anything. And there's limits to his understanding also, because the prime minister is normally the most misinformed person in the country, because it all depends on who he's surrounded by. When I see the people that surround Imran Khan, it doesn't make me very happy. Although he's a very good man, he's honest, and I have faith and trust in his honesty. But I don't have faith and trust anymore in his ability to actually wade out of this mess. Now we come to the military elite. Our military elite, of course, is much, much more cleaner than the civilian elite, but it's not clean enough, because the lower echelons of the military, alhamdulillah, are very good, but brigadier and beyond are, I'm not too sure what type of people they are, because they're not really doing justice by delaying and giving the enemy the chance to regroup and strengthen itself. So I think they're afraid. So my expectation from the military is to be a little bit more brave than you already are. We don't want you to make reckless decisions, but we don't want to short sell yourself either. So these two things. So in the end of the day, then the civilian dispensation doesn't matter. What matters with the boys with the gun. They have the ability to make things happen and scratch the political system and give Pakistan a new state with it underwritten by a new set of values which reflects people's beliefs and values. We are not white people from the West. We are Pakistanis, we're Punjabis, we're Pashtuns, we're Muslims, we're Sindhis, Balochis. So our new governance and political paradigm has to reflect these realities, and it is the responsibility of the military component of the state to actually hit the reset button. It has happened in so many countries, it has unsuccessfully happened before here in Pakistan. So as long as the Bajwa doctrine believes that the military should not be engaged in politics, I think we're daydreaming. Military is always engaged in politics. It should be engaged in politics. If it keeps its eyes closed from the political process, then it's not really doing its job. And so we want to have a stronger military, not a weaker one. And at this point, when I see weakness in the upper military leadership. And they're my brothers, I love them, but I want them to have confidence that people are behind them, and they should actually not have any reluctance in taking some very hard decisions, especially when it comes to system reset, when it comes to China, and when it comes to giving India the bloody nose, and when it comes to arming the Khalistan movement, arming the Kashmir movement, arming the Afghan resistance. That it is our responsibility, because it was our decision at the time of General Musharraf that we allowed the Americans in to come and kill our brothers in Afghanistan. Now it is our responsibility to redress that problem and arm our brothers so they can throw out the Americans.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jas. Very concisely, you have provided with such detailed different dimensions associated with it. I'm very grateful for that. How do you analyze the impact of that conflict, and how does it play on the younger generation? And do you approach Kashmir's conflict as a peculiar one, strictly which is embedded into regional dynamics, or you investigate also in global resonance? Since you have already pointed out, but again, I would like to put it in clear words, that do you think behind this Hindutva movement, is there any supported a secret hand, which you have already mentioned, but I would like you to be more open about it if you think that you would like to say anything about that. There is a secret force or a hand behind it. This is one thing that I wanted to ask. And the other thing that I wanted to ask is that do you think the international community underestimates the gravity of this conflict? Because if it is going to explode, it is going to explode for everyone.
The first part of the question, the Hindutva, there's not a secret hand behind it. There's a very overt and very easily observable hand behind it. One, if we choose to go into the history of the Hindutva, the Hindutva, of course, is a later concept, but RSS, which is a movement that began in 1920s, of course, the British were behind them. And the British in early 1900s had two preferences. They wanted to see their colonies appear in the image of the white man, which they consider was more superior. And you had these, people believed in religion and superstition, having a backward form of human consciousness, still stuck in religion and custom and tradition. So how can we reform them and make them like us, very civilized and nice looking people? So they supported a reform movement that just the way Europeans came out of the Christian slumber and got enlightenment and became modern and so forth. So maybe we can do the same thing with them, but we first have to change their beliefs and values. So how do you change beliefs and values? You bring about reformation. How do you bring about reformation in Hinduism? Well, do away with the system of caste. So the RSS first time came about by an atheist. Savarkar, one of the founders of the RSS, was an atheist, did not believe in God. So he um, said that we have been ruled by Muslims and now the British because our society is divided by castes. And so he went away and abolishing the caste system. And when Gandhi came around on the scene in 1930s, he detested that. He said, no, the caste system is the heart of Hinduism, and you take away the category of caste from Hinduism, it's like taking away the category of Tawheed from Islam. If you take away Tawheed from Islam, there's nothing left. So therefore, the reason for that was that Gandhi argued also that castes exist everywhere in the world, only the Hindus have made a science out of that. And caste systems, the development since the inception of Buddhism 2,600 years ago, has been practiced in a perverted form. So Gandhi said that we don't need to throw away the caste system, we need to take it back to the Vedas and take it back to the origin of the caste system, which is de-link caste from the blood, because castes are not hereditary. Today, Hindus think that Brahmin son is Brahmin, Kshatriya son is Kshatriya, but according to Vedas, that's not so. Caste is the temperament of your soul. ये आपके नफ्स का झुकाव होता है जो आपको कास्ट देता है, जात देता है, ठीक है? So that was the injustice that was done to Hinduism, that they destroyed themselves by reforming the cosmological quintessentialism of their deen, of their religion. Now, around the same time, the British supported the Ahmadi movement in Qadian. The Mirza Ghulam Ahmad also violated one of the quintessential elements of the deen, which is finality of the prophethood and eschatology of Islam. He said, Christ was not resurrected, he was killed and he died. So, and he said that, the prophecy continues. So the British were behind these two movements in order to have a reform. So that's a history of Hindutva, which is deeply problematic for the traditional Hindus. And the Ahmadiyya movement, which there is fair amount of freedom inside Pakistan for Ahmadis. I have some friends who are Ahmadis, and what I see, even in the civil and the military, I mean, you have Ahmadis at fairly very high positions in Pakistan, and so there is support for this process because both of these creeds, RSS and the Ahmadi branch of sect of Islam, are basically accommodate modernism much more than traditional Hinduism and traditional Islam. Now that's the first part of the answer, that who is behind Hindutva. There's no secret. This is very open history of RSS and Hindutva, what has come down to Hindu fascism today. The second thing, in international community, what do they say? Well, international community used to be, Belgium, Switzerland, and a few these tiny little European nations, hardly any population, and US and Canada and so forth. Now, international community is very strong component is Russia, China, countries of the Muslim world, countries of Asia, and upcoming countries in Latin America and Africa. So the white man is disappearing in numbers. So first of all, the United Nations system, which calls it the so-called international community, it was conceived about 100 years ago. And at that time, the world conditions were different and rest of the world was subjugated, colonized, and the white man ruled the roost. Today, the things are opposite. So all of these structures, World Bank, IMF, UNO, WHO, they have lost their validity, they've lost steam. So because the world reality has changed, which is why you have SCO, you have AIIB, and you have other institutions that are up and coming, which will become platforms for dispute resolutions. So if it had up to the international community, the Israel-Palestine issue would have been solved a long time ago. If we had left this to the conscience of the international community, the Kashmir issue would have been solved a long time ago. But since international communities is purposely designed to follow the preferences of the global deep state, hence we cannot have any expectation from the international, so-called international community. So therefore, you have to you have to arm these movements. You have to arm Afghan resistance, you have to arm Khalistan, you have to arm Kashmir. And then you'll see what happens in Nagorno-Karabakh just last month. I mean, imagine if the Azerbaijanis went and started knocking the doors of the United Nations. Do you think that they could have actually had Nagorno-Karabakh back? No. They took matters in their hand. They got the help of Turkey, a little bit of help of Pakistan, and they took it by force. Now it's theirs. And Kashmir, which is already de jure ours, or pending a plebiscite, which in any case will be ours, it's de facto not ours. So therefore, according to the laws of the United Nations, you can arm an oppressed population which is disenfranchised. And so you can ask Bilal Ahmed Sufi on this, that what is the international position on movements that need to be armed, that in which the United Nations system has become inept and proved not to solve their problems. How can they help themselves? Can they arm themselves? And the answer is yes, they can. They have the right to do that. So, and it's very easy. I mean, you know, we can buy a whole bunch of light weaponry. We can either airdrop, we can infiltrate, we can smuggle, we can push it through Ladakh, we can push it through Punjab, and we can arm. We should arm, because that's what the Indians did in Balochistan. That's what they did in Saraiki movement. That's what they did in Jai Sindh movement. That's what they did in every movement, every opportunity they got, they did it with us. So the Pakistanis would be naively stupid and naive not to take advantage of this situation. And I will say one last thing, that if Pakistan fails to liberate Kashmir at this time, and also Khalistan and Afghanistan, I think Pakistan will break.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. Thank you very much for such a detailed and in-depth to shed light on these issues, which are, of course, of great importance. The US and the Israelis and the Indians in keeping this brutal status quo in Kashmir. However, she would like to know that she's curious as to why Pakistanis are always so hesitant to saying openly how their brotherly Muslim nations in the Gulf are equally complicit in Indian state terror, while on the other hand, Turkey, Iran, and Malaysia are trying their best to express solidarity. Can you kindly respond to this? There's a question from one of the audience, if you would like to
Yes,
say a few. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Farka. I think that if you look at the map of the Middle East, and you look at the countries situated closest to the state of Israel, countries such as Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, you find that they are neutered. I would not say neutral, or they have been neutralized. I would say neutered. They have no capacity to offer any resistance against the forces of oppression in the world, which are primarily coming from Israel, because Israel is the arm of the global deep state. The world doesn't function the way we see it on CNN and BBC. A lot of things are happening behind the scenes, and the entities that actually have a lopsided control over institutions and nation states of the world are seldom seen. So if that view of global politics be correct, which is grounded in arguments by Stephen Walt and John Mearsheimer, authors of the book called The Israeli Lobby and How They Actually Control Things, then my analysis proceeds with this as an assumption, which is that the Americans would like to have either the Indian control of Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan so that the CPEC could be stopped and BRI will automatically lose steam, or they would like to have Kashmir as an independent country with American bases and the American puppet government. That also, if you give the Kashmiris the choice between what they are going through now and a normal life, but it will be under the American tutelage. They are so fed up with this type of life that they might even opt for that. That any life in which their children can go without being killed, raped, and maimed, that they could go about working on their fields and farms. They could actually sell their future with Pakistan for that, because they are fed up with this for the last 30 years. And if that happens, God forbid, then the Americans and the Israelis would have large number of bases. Because okay, if India couldn't do our dirty job, we take Kashmir away from India, we take it away from Pakistan, and we turn it into our client and puppet state. And then we sit there and we create problem in Xinjiang and chip away Xinjiang across the border from Kashmir and Ladakh. And then we also do mischief in Tibet. And then we also put the Dalai Lama back in Tibet, and we cut down China to its 1/3 of its size. That's their strategy and planning. That's their thinking. So because why? Because they're fascist at the end of the day. They do not accept that anybody else other than European powers should actually control the world and make the rules of the game. And the Zionists believe that the Europeans are goyim, they are better than Africans and other brown people, but they're still not as good as us. And so even they are expendable. So at the end of the day, the issue cannot be understood without a minimal level of spiritual intelligence. The problem with the secular Pakistanis is that they have completely let gone on their spiritual understanding of the world, that their geopolitics reflects nothing of their own tradition. And whereas we are heirs to so many prophecies by the Prophet, premonitions in the Quran, we have our other saints have actually offered a lot of prophecies, and many of them have come true. Yet our rationalist mindset, which has been shaped by the white man, doesn't allow us to go there. And I'm sorry to say that if we let go of our own traditional bases of knowledge, which are actually spiritual in nature, combined with common sense, what is visible to us today, then if you take any other decisions away from these two realities, one is empirical reality and second is a spiritual reality, then I think that we will lose it. And that's what my earlier critique, in an earlier segment, when I said what I said about the ruling elite of Pakistan, out of which the civilians, I have absolutely no expectations from this group, because they're the most corrupt people in the world. But what is disappointing for me is the military top brass is showing sometimes is very, very, it drags its feet and fumbles up its timing on important issues. And one of the very important issues right now is Operation Cleanup from Home, which cannot be done with the current political system, with the current legal system, with the current business practices. So this is my appeal to our hard state. The heart of the state is the military, and heart of the military is the ISI, and other intelligence agencies, not only ISI. And so it is my appeal to my brothers, my serving officers who are in these organizations, to please take a little bit proactive role, an aggressive role, and take step number one is to outlaw this media. There is no such thing as free speech. Absolute free speech does not exist anywhere in the world. There are always limits to free speech. And as long as you allow these people to actually poison the public mind, then you're either complicit with the process or you're stupid. And I don't think that they are stupid. I think they're very intelligent people. I think they're complicit. Why they are complicit, I do not know. And so that's my hope and my prayer for the deepest echelons of power in our country to act very, very sensibly and act on time. Please do not consider that you're compromised. The nation is behind you. Take some very, very difficult decisions now.
Thank you, Dr. Jas. I must say that you're right, and we all pray that some meaningful decision is taken and some good comes for the Kashmiris who are suffering for so long. I would like to invite Dr. Shah, is the chairperson of WIL, to share her thoughts and her opinion with us on this current discussion that we have. Kindly, Dr. Nushap, I would like to take you the floor.
کشمیر جل رہا ہے اور آج سے نہیں کافی عرصے سے ہم دیکھ رہے ہیں. لہو لہو ہے, زخمی ہے, اس کے ساتھ ہمارا دل بھی لہو ہے. ہر انسان, ہر فرد جس کے سینے میں ایک دھڑکتا ہوا دل ہو وہ روتا ہے, اور ایسا گزشتہ 74 برس سے ہو رہا ہے. وہاں کی ہسٹری سے ہم سب آگاہ ہیں, وہاں کی تقسیم کی بنیاد وہ سب آگاہ ہیں, اس سے بچپن سے ہی جانتے ہیں کہ کیا ہوا کیا نہیں, اور کس بنیاد پر کیا اس کی جو ہے تقسیم کی گئی. مسلمانوں کی 70% آبادی کے ہونے کے باوجود یہ فیصلہ انگریز لارڈ ماؤنٹ بیٹن اور دیگر رہنماؤں کی ملی بھگت کے باعث ہوا. اب کچھ لوگ کہتے ہیں کہ ہم کیا کریں, یا کچھ لوگ بے حس ہیں. اس پہ میں کچھ تھوڑی سی بعد میں بھی بات کروں گی ڈاکٹر اعجاز صاحب کے ویوز سے متفق ہوتے ہوئے. لیکن یہ کہ ہم اس درد کو کیوں محسوس کریں, یا ان کو احساس نہیں ہوتا. بحیثیت انسان بھی ایک احساس ہونا ضروری ہے, لیکن بحیثیت ایک مسلم امہ کے ایک اہم اور حساس فرشناس فرد ہوتے ہوئے ہمیں یہ احساس ہونا چاہیے. اور میں رسول اللہ صلی اللہ علیہ وآلہ وسلم کے الفاظ میں اس کی یاد دہانی کرانے چاہوں گی, کیونکہ ایک حدیث ہے اور انہی کے الفاظ میں یہ بات مسلم کی حدیث ہے. حضرت نعمان بن بشیر رضی اللہ عنہ روایت کرتے ہیں کہ رسول اللہ صلی اللہ علیہ وآلہ وسلم نے فرمایا, ایمان والے آپس میں محبت, ایک دوسرے پر رحم اور باہمی تعاون کرنے میں ایک جسم کی مانند ہیں. اگر جسم کے ایک عضو میں تکلیف ہو تو اس کی وجہ سے سارے جسم کی نیند اڑ جاتی ہے اور سارا جسم بخار میں مبتلا ہو جاتا ہے. 5 اگست 2019 کو آرٹیکل 370 کا نفاذ, نئی دہلی گورنمنٹ کی فورسڈ امپوزیشن اور اس کو آئین سے منسوخ کر دینا, یہ سب بھی جو حکومتی ظلم و ستم اور جبر و استبداد کی جو ایک رودات تھی اس کے اندر ایک ایڈیشن تھا, اور پھر یہ ظلم و ستم بڑھتا چلا گیا. مقامی رہنماؤں کو قید و بند کی صعوبتوں میں جکڑ دیا گیا, اور ابھی تک جکڑے ہوئے, یہاں تک کہ سیاست جو اس کو مفلوج کر دیا گیا. پولیٹیکل پیرالسس کی کیفیت ایک عرصے سے وہاں پر قائم, پھر کرفیو کا نفاذ جو کہ ہم دیکھ رہے ہیں, سوشل میڈیا پہ پابندیاں, اکنامک کرائسس تو پورے ورلڈ میں, پوری دنیا میں ہی موجود تھا, لیکن یہاں پر جس طرح سے کیفیت طاری تھی کہ اس کو بھی جو ہے بالکل مفلوج کر دیا گیا. فریڈم, جیسے کہ سیاست کی بات ہو ہی گئی, میں اس کو کیا ریپیٹ کروں, لیکن وہ بھی فریڈم پیرالسس بھی ہو گیا. کسی نے یہ لکھا کہ کشمیر's لاک ڈاؤن began way before the world was forced into isolation, or means of course the COVID-19 issue, and it's still going on to last. بٹ یہ کہ کشمیریوں کے لیے تو یہ ایک بہت ہی بڑا وہ تھا, اور اس سے پہلے ہی اس کا آغاز سالوں سے ہو رہا ہے. بہت تکلیف دہ یعنی صورتحال ہے. ڈاکٹر گریگری ایچ اسٹینٹن جو فاؤنڈر اینڈ پریزیڈنٹ ہیں آف جینوسائڈ واچ وچ از اے گلوبل آرگنائزیشن, اور ڈاکٹر اسٹینٹن یو ایس ڈپارٹمنٹ آف اسٹیٹ کے لیے کام کرتے رہے. یہ یونائٹڈ نیشن سیکورٹی کونسل ریزولوشنز کو ڈرافٹ کرنے میں بھی ایک جانا پہچانا نام ہے. وہ برملا کہتے ہیں کہ کشمیر از ان اے ویری کلیئر پری جینوسائڈل سچویشن. میں جب اس کو بار بار پڑھ رہی تھی, پری جینوسائڈل प्री जेनोसाइडल, लेकिन मेरे जहन में ये आ रहा था कि ये हम जैसे उसको देखते हैं कि ये जेनोसाइड के बहुत नज़दीक है, मतलब हो रहा है जिस तरीके से वो करना चाह रहे हैं, या जो उनके हिंदुत्व जो है मूवमेंट है, जो भी उनकी सारी ये जो अज़ाइम हैं वो नज़र आ रहे हैं जिस तरह से उन्होंने किया। जो ये काबिज़ हुकूमत है, जो न्यू दिल्ली की गवर्नमेंट थी, उसने 7 मिलियन से ज़्यादा कश्मीरियों को घरों में मुक़य्यद कर दिया। ये तो घरों की बात है। बाकी ये कि 4000 कश्मीरी जेल में हैं, जो कि 5 अगस्त 2019 को जो ये आर्टिकल का नफाज हुआ, उस वक्त उनको जेल में कर दिया गया। 1,100,000 से ज़्यादा शहीद कर दिए गए, और ये विकिपीडिया का नंबर है। अकॉर्डिंग टू पाकिस्तानी पीएम, वैसे इसके डिफरेंट फिगर्स मिलते हैं, ह्यूमन राइट्स कुछ ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस हैं, उसमें थोड़ी थोड़ी वेरिएशंस हैं, लेकिन जब अकॉर्डिंग टू पाकिस्तानी पीएम वो 25 सितंबर 2020 को गए, और उन्होंने यूनाइटेड नेशन से बड़ा ही बेबाक और निडर जो था वो मुखातिब किया, और उन्होंने ये कहा, उन्होंने वहाँ पे भी ये बताया कि जो भारतीय फौजी हैं वो उनका फिगर जो है तकरीबन 9 लाख है। जो उन्होंने कहा कि भारतीय फौज 9 लाख के करीब है, कहीं पे ये 100,000 इससे ज़्यादा भी आता है, 10 लाख के करीब भी आता है। लाखों गुमशुदा हैं, हाफ विडोज का मसला अलग है, कुछ नहीं पता कि जो उनके घर, उनके जो शौहर हैं वो कहाँ गए, वो जिंदा भी हैं या किस हालत में हैं। कुछ को वहाँ की जेल और कुछ को जो है वो भारत की जेल्स में ले जाया जाता है, और कुछ पता ही नहीं होता कि वो क्या है और उनके साथ क्या हो रहा है, और वो जिंदा हैं मुर्दा हैं। तो ऐसी कैफियत अगर हम चंद लम्हे को भी हमारे लिए सोचना जो है वो मुश्किल होता है, एक हसास दिल के लिए, जैसे मैंने शुरू में कहा। फिर जो टीनेज लड़के होते हैं उनको भी उठा के ले जाया जाता है, 14, 15, 16 साल के लड़के, उनका भी कुछ पता नहीं चलता। एक मैंने वाकया पढ़ा एक कश्मीरी बाप का, कि उसका इसी तरह एक टीनेज, इतनी छोटी उम्र, अर्ली टीनेज राइट का लड़का था, और वो कब्र खोद कर वो बैठा हुआ है, और कब्र उसने खोद ली है, और वो दुआ करता है और वो रोता है और कब्र के पास बैठता है, और वो ये कहता है कि मैं अपने बेटे को जरूर देखूंगा और फिर मैं उसको जो है वो दफन करूंगा। बहरहाल जाहिर है कि वो एक डिफरेंट साइकोलॉजिकल साइकेट्रिक प्रॉब्लम्स वो सारे भी शुरू हो गए, बहुत सारी इनसिक्योरिटीज के साथ। किसी लड़की या औरत की इज्जत और इस्मत महफूज नहीं। भारतीय फौजी हम सब जानते हैं कि बेधड़क जो है घरों में दाखिल हो जाते हैं, और फिर वो जो चाहते हैं वो करते हैं। तो ये एक, क्योंकि मैं ज़ाहिर विल के प्लेटफॉर्म से बात कर रही हूँ, तो एक औरत के लिए एक ये गवारा करना या ये सोचना भी बहुत तकलीफदेह एक अमल है। अब हमारी रिकमेंडेशंस क्या है कि नेशनल सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल रेजोल्यूशन जो है उस पर अमल दरामद हो, और जो इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी है, जैसे कि डॉक्टर एजाज ने भी फरमाया, कि मैं इसको ये कहूँगी कि ये जो हम सिर्फ ये कहते हैं ना कि वो अपना रोल अदा करें, या हम बात करते हैं या प्रेसिडेंट्स प्राइम मिनिस्टर्स भी इस पर बात करते हैं, इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी जो है वो एक्टिव हो, मसले कश्मीर का पुरअमन सियासी हल निकाले। तो इसका मतलब ये नहीं है, जैसे कि आपने फरमाया डॉक्टर एजाज साहब, कि जो है हम ये बात करें, इसके लिए कुछ स्टेप्स उठाए जाएं। और जब जो मैंने पहले पॉइंट भी कहा यूएन सिक्योरिटी काउंसिल रेजोल्यूशन का, कि मतलब ये चीज़ें जो थी उसके ऊपर सॉलिड बात हो, और ये कि और भाई आगे मतलब क्या हो रहा है, और रेगुलर उसके ऊपर एक्शन कुछ हो रहा है, या सिर्फ वो वहीं पर ही दफन हो जाती है बात जो यहाँ से मुतालबात है। फिर हम मुतालबा ही करते हैं कि हुकूमत जो ये जाबिर हुकूमत है वो अपनी फ़ौज, अपनी मिलिट्री को मकबूजा कश्मीर से फिलफौर जो है वो बेदखल करे। تمام سیاسی قیدیوں کو رہا کیا جائے. ہم چاہتے ہیں کہ مقبوضہ کشمیر کی مظلوم قوم کو اس کا حق خود ارادیت دلائے جائے. 5 فروری ہر بار آتا ہے اور ہمارے زخموں کو ہرا کر دیتا ہے. اور لیکن یہ کہ خوشائن بات یہ ہے کہ اس دفعہ بھی میں نے دیکھا، پڑھتی رہی کافی اس مسئلے پہ، کہ بہرحال آواز اٹھائی جاتی ہے اور سولیڈیرٹی ڈے میں بات ہوتی ہے، لوگ ملتے ہیں. پوری بین الاقوامی برادری یکجہتی کشمیر کے لیے اس دن، لیکن یہ کہ ویسے ہمیشہ ہی ہر روز ہی اس پہ جو ہے وہ متوجہ ہے. موجودہ حکومت کے بارے میں جو تبصرے تھے، میں ڈاکٹر صاحب سے بھی بہت اتفاق کروں گی، لیکن انہوں نے بات رکھی اور میں متفق ہوں کہ جو انہوں نے پوائنٹ آف ویو رکھا، I don't want to repeat it. بہرحال he was brave enough to stand up at that level جو میں نے ابھی ذکر کیا. اور انہوں نے انٹرنیشنلی جو ہے اس مسئلہ کشمیر کو اجاگر کیا. اور RPM was very bold to say this. ہم پاکستانی ہیں اور کشمیر کے ساتھ کھڑے ہیں. پاکستان stands with کشمیر. پاکستان زندہ باد. کشمیری عوام زندہ باد. اپنی بات کو، اچھا ایک بات جو میں، بہت سی باتیں ڈاکٹر صاحب کی اچھی تھی اور ساری ہی بہت بہترین تھی، بہت کچھ سیکھنے کو ملا. ماشاءاللہ سے اللہ تعالیٰ آپ کے علم میں اور زیادہ اضافہ کرے اور آپ کو اس باعث اور آپ نے ہزاروں لاکھوں لوگوں کو فائدہ پہنچایا ہوگا، لیکن مزید جو ہے لوگوں کو آپ فیض پہنچا سکیں. کہ ایک تو مجھے یہ بات کہ جو ہماری جو گورنمنٹ ہے، ہمیں نائب مطلب یہ کہ اس کو پرو ایکٹیو ہونے کی ضرورت ہے. اور آپ نے جو یہ بات کہا کہ یا تو اسٹوپڈ ہے یا وہ جو دوسرا والا جو آپ نے کہا کہ اسٹوپڈ تو نہیں ہے نا، تو وہ تو بات بالکل طے ہے. تو وی ہیو ٹو بی پرو ایکٹیو، وی ہیو ٹو ٹیک سم اسٹیپس. آخر جو مرد مومن جو ہوتا ہے، اللہ تعالیٰ کو بھی مضبوط توانا مومن پسند ہے. اللہ تعالیٰ کو کمزور ٹوٹا پھوٹا، ایک کہیں مریل ایک شخص جا رہا تھا نا، رسول اللہ صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم نے پوچھا تمہیں کیا پرابلم ہے؟ تمہیں کوئی بیماری ہے، تمہیں کوئی مسئلہ ہے؟ یا ایک شخص آیا، اس سے بال نہیں کنگھی کیے ہوئے تھے کہ بھائی تمہارے پاس کوئی ایسی چیز نہیں جس سے تم اپنے بال ٹھیک کرو. تو کہنے کا مقصد یہ ہے کہ I mean this is a great cause. This is not something کہ جس کو جو ہے ہم ایسے ہی بیٹھے رہیں. تو یہ ہے کہ ہم دعا کرتے ہیں کہ کاش کہ ہم اپنی زندگیوں میں یہ چیز دیکھ سکیں، اس کو آزاد ہوتا دیکھ سکیں. اور اللہ نہ کرے، جیسے کہ ڈاکٹر صاحب کو میں بار بار کوٹ کر رہی ہوں، مجھے بہت اچھا لگا ان کی گفتگو اور ماشاءاللہ، کہ اللہ نہ کرے کوئی ایسی سچویشن آئے کہ کوئی پاپٹ گورنمنٹ وہاں پہ آتی ہے اور وہ لوگ خدا نہ خواستہ اپنے آپ کو سرنڈر کر دیں، اور پھر ان کو ظاہر ہے اس میں ویلیوز اور ساری چیزوں کے مسئلے مسائل ہیں.
یہ جو پوائنٹ ابھی آپ نے ریز کیا نا، یہ جو اس بڑا سینسٹیو ہے، سوری ٹو انٹرپٹ یو. اس میں جو ڈر ہے وہ یہ ہے کہ اگر فار ایگزامپل چائنا کی ہیلپ سے بھی لبریٹ ہوتا ہے کشمیر اور پاکستانیز اپنا اس میں رول نہیں پلے کرتے، چائنیز کیجولٹیز لیتے ہیں، وہ آتے ہیں کنیٹک مینز یوز کرتے ہیں اور وہ آ کے انڈیا کو ڈیفیٹ کرتے ہیں، تو تب بھی جو کشمیری ہمیشہ یہ کبھی بھولیں گے نہیں، ہمارے بھی اور مقبوضہ کشمیر کے بھی، کہ پاکستان کو جب چاہیے تھا آنے کا وہ نہیں آیا، دیر آئے درست آئے. تو اب ہم اگر چائنا کے نیچے اگر وہ ہمیں انڈیپینڈنٹ کر دیتا ہے اور سی پیک کا حصہ بناتا ہے، تو ہم انڈیپینڈنٹلی نیپال کی طرح ایک ملک بن کے سی پیک کا حصہ بن جاتے ہیں. لیکن شاید پھر ہمارا ان کے ساتھ ویزا سسٹم ہو، اور وہ جو ابھی اس وقت ہماری عزت ہے ان کے دل میں، شاید وہ پھر اس وقت نہ ہو. تو یہ ایک اور پوائنٹ تھا جو میں ساتھ میں مینشن کرنا چاہ رہا تھا. پلیز.
جی بلا شبہ بہت اچھا. بہت شکریہ ادا کرتی ہوں ڈاکٹر اعجاز اکرم صاحب آپ کا، آپ کی بہت زبردست انپٹ کا، آپ کی نالج کا، آپ خزانہ ہے ماشاءاللہ آپ کے پاس. اور پھر دعا دیتی ہوں کہ اللہ تعالیٰ آپ کو اس مزید مقام دے کہ آپ بہت سے لوگوں کو فیض پہنچا سکیں. بہت شکریہ فائقہ صاحبہ آپ کا بھی. اور میری طرف سے سب کو السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much for all your time. I'm very grateful to Dr. Noshaba. I'm very humbly thankful to Dr. Ijaz. I learned a lot from you, Dr. Ijaz, having different angles and different dimensions to look at this issue. And I'm so grateful that Dr. Noshaba has created this forum for all of us to learn from all what we discuss here, and also to raise our voices and awareness. Thank you, everyone. Really humbled to have you here. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you, Dr.